Hello, guys. Today, let me tell you a story about the god Apollo and the secrets of his optimization. We're heading deep into the dustiest corners of Greek mythology, where the drama still simmers, but at a much, much lower boil. You're about to tag along with a god who's been grounded, humiliated, and handed a job that involves sheep. That's right. It's time to watch Apollo, the golden boy, the sun chariot driver, Mr. I invented poetry, get fired from Olympus and end up babysitting livestock in the middle of nowhere. The air smells like thyme, the grass is itchy, and you probably won't survive this if you're allergic to divine egos. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. I love knowing where you all are drifting off from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing just off the edge of Olympus, right where the clouds start to get tired. Apollo is not in a good mood. His robe is wrinkled, his laurel wreath is slightly wilted, and his divine glow has that dull, overworked office lamp hue. You've caught him mid-banishment. Yes, even golden gods hit the boots sometimes, especially when they commit light murder or insult the wrong divine supervisor. Historians still argue whether Apollo's exile was punishment for killing the Cyclopes or mouthing off to Zeus about lightning bolt quality control. Either way, the result's the same: one very shiny god, kicked out of heavens like a drunk uncle at a wedding. You walk with him, sandals scraping dusty ground. His sun chariot, nowhere to be found. His twin sister Artemis, probably off being competent. Apollo's got nothing but his lyre, his hair, and an expression that says, "I am very much too good for this." It's early morning in Thessaly, and Apollo is doing that awkward thing where you pretend to be enjoying the sunrise while internally screaming. The fields stretch out in a sleepy golden haze. Somewhere a goat sneezes. The vibe is Instagram pastoral, but with a bitter aftertaste. You trail behind him as he wanders through villages, pretending not to care that absolutely no one is recognizing him. He tries humming a melody. A dog barks. A child throws a stick at him. It's humbling, possibly character building, definitely undignified. Mainstream historical fact. In many ancient Greek myths, the gods were not above mingling with mortals or being temporarily demoted. It was a known plot device. Sin against Olympus, get tossed down to earth, earn redemption, go back up, like divine reality TV, but with fewer confessionals and more goats. Apollo eventually makes it to the city of Faerie, where the mortal king Admetus rules with chill attitude and, crucially, a job opening. He's short one shepherd, not because of monsters or anything, just because his last guy left for better pay and fewer ewes. Apollo, being a god of music and prophecy and not, say, hey, allergies, is not the obvious candidate. But divine punishment is divine punishment. You watch him fake a smile, tuck his lyre under one arm, and offer services like he hasn't just spent the last 100 years setting suns and slaying Python. Fringe tidbit. This myth, Apollo serving Admetus as a herdsman, is one of the few times a Greek god holds down a day job. No lightning bolts, no epic quests, just sheep fields and an occasional deeply awkward lunch break. Admetus, for his part, is unbothered. He takes one look at Apollo and thinks, sure, why not? Maybe it's the hair, maybe it's the aura, Maybe it's a divine reference letter Apollo mumbled into existence. Either way, the deal is struck. Apollo is now officially employed. You follow him to his new post, an open stretch of grasslands dotted with sheep that look both unimpressed and mildly suspicious. Apollo stares at them. They stare back. This is not the glorious return to Earth he was hoping for. And yet, there's something weirdly peaceful about it all. The wind carries the smell of olive branches and something slightly scorched. Apollo probably tried to start a fire using only a smile. The sun, his son, rises a little slower, maybe out of respect, maybe out of spite. Apollo sets down his lyre and tests out whistling for the sheep. Nothing. He claps. One sheep blinks. You can practically feel his dignity crumble like feta under pressure. Still, he starts to walk the fields, sheep following in a sort of lazy wave. And you, watching from a slight rise, notice something strange. The grass seems greener behind him. The trees seem to straighten a little. Birds hop closer. Even the wind behaves. Historians still argue whether Apollo actually uses divine powers to charm the landscape, or if it's just a poetic way of saying he looked good doing manual labor. Either way, the result is the same. The land responds to him, and he slowly starts responding to the land. He hums a little as he walks now. The sheep don't run. A lamb wobbles up to him, sneezes, and Apollo doesn't even flinch. That's progress. And just like that, you're there beside him, watching a god begin the slow, quiet process of learning how to be not a god, just a man with a stick, a flock, and a whole lot of time to think. Apollo trudges uphill, sandals slick with dew, robe slightly crooked. He hasn't quite figured out the difference between wind-swept elegance and wrinkled shepherd. You walk beside him as he surveys his new kingdom. Rocks, grass, a stone trough, and a sheep chewing on what may or may not be his belt tassel. God of music, light, healing truth, he mutters to himself, yanking the wool out of the sheep's mouth. And now, petting zoo supervisor. The sheep snorts, possibly in agreement. It's mid-morning now, and the sun, which used to rise on Apollo's command, is doing just fine without him. He watches it rise anyway, quietly, like someone glancing at their ex's vacation photos and pretending not to care. Thessaly stretches around him, wide and open, with fields like patchwork cloaks and olive trees growing like wise old introverts. Apollo looks utterly out of place, more marble statue than farmhand, but you can already sense the first soft shift. He's listening more, watching more, judging slightly less. Only slightly. Mainstream historical fact. In ancient Greece, shepherding wasn't considered glamorous, but it wasn't scorned either. Mythology often placed heroes and gods in rustic roles as a form of penance or humility training. Shepherding, in particular, symbolized a sort of regrounding, literally and spiritually. It meant watching, tending, waiting. Things gods are famously impatient with. But Apollo is trying. He's watching the sheep. He's learning their names, or inventing them, rather. That one with the crooked horn, General Bleatamus. The fluffy one that walks sideways, Dion Sheepus. He even starts to laugh at his own terrible jokes. Progress. Still, he doesn't exactly blend in. At the market in Ferry, he's immediately spotted. Not as a god, of course, but as that new guy with the cheekbones. The fishmonger frowns. The baker raises an eyebrow. Someone calls him shiny. You don't blame them. Apollo glows like someone left him too close to a hearth. He buys cheese, drops the coins, forgets the change. The vendor shrugs and throws in a figure. Because really, what else do you do with a glowing man who doesn't know how commerce works? Back in the pastures, Apollo attempts small talk with the local shepherds. It goes badly. He references Pinder. They reference where to find good goat milk. He tries quoting oracles. They talk about mud. It's a mismatch, but he doesn't give up. Fringe tidbit. Some ancient sources suggest Apollo had to disguise his true identity during his exile, not out of necessity, but out of cosmic etiquette. Gods didn't just go around flaunting their titles during punishment. It was like wearing a crown to detention. So, you watch as Apollo, yes, that Apollo, learns to be anonymous. He's no longer the solar superstar. He's just a guy who brings surprisingly good cheese and tells weirdly accurate weather forecasts. One afternoon, a thunderstorm brews in the distance. Apollo sniffs the air, nods, and casually announces, "Rain in 7 minutes." The shepherds laugh. 7 minutes later, it rains. No one questions it. They just hand him a spare cloak and mutter something about good instincts. Apollo smiles into the wool. It smells like wet hope. There's a rhythm now. Wake with the sheep, walk the fields, eat barley bread and olives, play soft music on the lyre at dusk. It's not Olympus, but it's not nothing. You follow him one evening as he returns from the market, carrying a basket of herbs and bread, a stick of honeycomb tucked behind one ear like an artist's quill. He hums, off-key, relaxed, even a little tired. Tired, a word that rarely applies to gods. He pauses on a low hill, watches the sun dip toward the edge of the world. "I used to drive that," he mutters. "Now I just wave goodbye." Then he chuckles, and it's the kind of laugh that's heavier than it sounds. Historians still argue whether Apollo's time as a mortal changed him deeply or merely annoyed him briefly. Some say it made him more compassionate, more grounded. Others say he left just as vain as he arrived, but with better sheep-related metaphors. You sit beside him, letting the silence settle. Crickets chirp. The stars blink to life. In the distance, a shepherd's dog barks at nothing. Apollo lies back, fingers tucked behind his head. "You ever think about how ridiculous all this is?" He says, "More to the sky than to you. I used to be worshipped with hymns and incense. Now I'm worried about sheep diarrhea." You don't answer, partly because there's no good response to that, and partly because he seems content to let the thought hang in the air. He's quiet for a long time. Then, still, the stars look the same from here. And they do. You wake to the soft rustle of olive branches and the smell of toasted barley. Apollo is already up, combing a lamb's fleece with fingers that once strummed divine chords. His hair's tied back now, lazily but effectively, and his robe has a patch where a goat chewed a corner off last week. You barely recognize him. He hums a melody, not one of those sweeping, eternal hymns that echo across mountaintops. No, this one's simple, small. It sounds like something you'd hum while boiling lentils. The lamb nuzzles his leg. He offers it a piece of fig, because of course he does. It declines, because sheep don't really like figs. He shrugs, eats it himself. Progress. Today is shearing day. Apollo is not thrilled. You follow him down to the lower pasture, where the air is full of wool, dust, and the very distinct smell of livestock panic. The shepherds greet him with nods and a few friendly insults, most of them about his hands, which look more used to lyres and blades. They hand him shears. He holds them like he's just been gifted an unfamiliar musical instrument and told it might explode. Mainstream historical fact. In ancient Greece, shearing was a communal activity, part necessity, part celebration. Wool was a major part of the economy, and managing flocks was labor-intensive but respected. Even gods, it seems, couldn't get out of the itchy parts. Apollo crouches, braces himself, and begins. The sheep is not cooperative. It wiggles. It flops. At one point, it sneezes directly into his face. You watch him blink, wipe his cheek, and mutter something in ancient Elysian that probably translates to unbelievable. It takes him 4 times longer than anyone else. But when he finally steps back, he holds a heap of fleece like it's a newborn star. The shepherds applaud, more or less sarcastically, and toss him a skin of watered wine. He drinks, wipes his mouth, and tries to hand the shears to a goat. The goat headbutts him gently. He sighs. You laugh. The day rolls forward. By afternoon, Apollo's robes are streaked with lanolin and pride. He lounges under a fig tree, chewing bread and goat cheese, listening to the breeze play through the valley like it's auditioning for his Nexum. Nearby, 2 shepherds argue over whether the stars are holes in the sky or actual fiery objects. Apollo listens, lips twitching, then calmly says, "They're flaming spheres of gas, billions of leagues away." They blink at him. One nods slowly. The other throws a fig at his head. Apollo takes the hit. It's progress. Fringe tidbit. Some lesser-known versions of Apollo's exile suggest he didn't just observe humanity. He secretly tried to improve it, whispering better crop techniques, teaching new melodies, offering quiet advice on ankle sprains and infant fevers. Quiet miracles. No thunderbolts needed. You catch glimpses of this as you follow him through his days. The time he steadies a sick lamb with a touch that glows faintly golden. The moment he adjusts a shepherd's flute, and suddenly the notes no longer shriek like dying pigeons. He never brags. He just nods, then slips away like a shadow cast by moonlight. One evening, he builds a small cairn on the edge of a ridge, just a pile of stones, carefully stacked. A marker, he explains, so I don't forget this place. He doesn't say why he might need to remember, but his voice has that slight crackle like parchment near flame. Historians still argue whether Apollo's exile was self-contained, or if it influenced other gods to explore humanity in subtler ways. Some even suggest this was the blueprint for future. Gods walking among mortals not to rule, but to witness. One night, around a low campfire, a shepherd tells a story about a dream where he saw a golden man banish wolves with a song. Weirdest dream, he laughs. Probably the wine. Apollo just smiles and refills his cup. The days start to blend. The sheep graze. The goats scream. The sun rises and sets without fanfare. You watch as Apollo slips more and more into rhythm. Not as a prisoner, but as someone rediscovering silence. You even catch him helping patch a hut roof once, climbing like a mortal, grumbling about splinters. At one point he stubs his toe and yells something celestial. A small pine tree wilts nearby. No one mentions it. Later that week, a child from the village runs up, holding a broken lyre string. "Can you fix it?" she asks. Apollo kneels, fingers gentle, and nods. When he rest strings it, the sound it makes is softer than usual, but still magic. He hands it back. She grins. Thanks, shiny guy. He bows with exaggerated flair. She rolls her eyes. Progress. You sit with him that evening, watching the stars emerge. He points to each one, murmuring names, his names, old and secret. That one, he says, I place myself after a woman who sang like thunder. You listen. He grows quiet. Then, do you think it's possible, he asks softly, for a god to miss being small? You don't answer. You don't need to. You wake to the sound of a goat eating a tunic. Not your tunic. Thank the fates. But someone's... Apollo is chasing the goat with a half-hearted sort of dignity, brandishing a stick and muttering what sounds like celestial profanity disguised as nursery rhymes. Eventually, the goat relents. The tunic, now damp and structurally questionable, is retrieved. Apollo inspects the damage, sighs, and flings the stick like he's trying to javelin away his disappointment. The goat immediately eats the stick. That's how the day begins. You join him on the trail toward the high pastures. The sun hasn't fully committed yet. It lingers low and gold across the hills, painting everything in soft amber. Dew clings to your sandals. The sheep bleat with theatrical urgency, as if the grass might vanish without their attention. Apollo walks in silence. No humming today. His eyes scan the horizon like he's waiting for a message, or trying to ignore one. Halfway up the trail, you pass a cluster of shrine stones, rough altars draped in ribbons, feathers, and offerings of olive oil. The shepherds nod at them. Apollo stops. For a moment, his shoulders shift, like he's remembering who he used to be. He places a single fig on the flat stone, says nothing, keeps walking. Mainstream historical fact. In rural Greece, especially during the archaic and classical periods, small roadside shrines dotted the landscape. They weren't built for grand temple gods, but for local spirits, lesser deities, and travelers' protection. Offerings were often symbolic, small acts of gratitude or plea. At the pasture, the flock spreads like spilled grain. Apollo watches the hills, arms crossed, jaw set. You ask him what's wrong. He shakes his head. Storm's coming, he says. The sky is blue. The air is still. But sure enough, by mid-afternoon, clouds gather like gossip over Olympus. The wind picks up. The sheep bunch together nervously. You smell rain. The shepherds rush into motion, herding animals toward a copse of wind-stunted trees. Apollo moves with them, shouting instructions, guiding ewes with uncanny ease. He lifts a lamb, holds it to his chest as thunder rumbles. You swear you see his skin flicker gold for a second. By the time the rain arrives, sharp and sudden, you're all tucked beneath the branches, soaked but safe. Apollo sits beside you, legs muddy, tunic plastered to his chest. He's smiling, not because he's dry, but because the lamb is chewing on his hair, and he's letting it. Mortals are ridiculous, he says. You agree, but you don't move. Fringe tidbit. In some lost hymns, Apollo is said to have had a mortal friend during his exile, an unnamed shepherd or hunter who taught him how to live without temples or laurels. Some scholars think this was metaphor. Others believe it was memory. The rain passes. The sky clears. Everything smells like wet earth and sheep. Apollo stands, stretches, and begins gathering fallen branches. Firewood, he explains. Unless you like shivering, you build a fire together. The flames crackle low and steady. The shepherd begin roasting something questionable on a stick. Some kind of tuber that may or may not have been stolen from a pig stash. You try not to think about it too hard. Apollo unwraps a bundle from his satchel. Yes, he has a satchel now, and reveals a small wheel of cheese, a handful of olives, and a flatbread folded in thirds. He breaks the bread, offers you half. It's still warm. Historians still argue whether this pastoral exile was punishment or preparation. Some believe Zeus meant to humble Apollo. Others think the king of gods was buying time, waiting for something or someone to change. You and Apollo eat in silence. Around you, the shepherds laugh and bicker. One attempts to balance a skewer on his nose. Fails. Tries again. The stars emerge one by one lazily, as if reluctant to leave the clouds. Apollo watches them with a kind of sadness you feel more than see. Then, out of nowhere, he speaks. I didn't want to burn him. You don't ask who. You know, it always comes back to Asclepius, the mortal healer, Apollo's son, the boy who learned to raise the dead, the boy Zeus struck down with a lightning bolt. You'd hope to avoid this story, but it waits here. Patient as a lion in tall grass, Apollo goes quiet again. He finishes his bread, fingers tracing the edge like it's a lyre string. You make someone brilliant, he murmurs, and the world punishes him for shining too brightly. You want to say something comforting, maybe profound, but the wind takes the words from your throat before they form. Instead, you poke the fire, offer him the last olive. He takes it, chews thoughtfully. A shepherd starts playing a flute, badly, but with heart. Someone else claps along. Apollo listens, then pulls out a reed pipe he didn't know he had. He joins in, slowly, then with confidence. The notes are low, warm, unambitious. They drift through the trees like stories half remembered. You lie back on the grass, belly full, the sound of sheep and music mingling in the dark. Tomorrow, there will be more work, more shearing, more storms, more silence. But for now, you let the god beside you become just a man with tired feet, sticky hands, and a song he's not quite ready to finish. You wake up with grass in your mouth and Apollo's foot in your ribs. He's snoring softly, face tilted toward the sky, like he's still waiting for an answer. The fire is ash now. The shepherds are stirring. Somewhere in the distance, a goat lets out a bleat so tragic you briefly wonder if it lost a will to live. You sit up slowly, brushing off dew and dignity. Apollo stretches, groans, and immediately tries to act like he wasn't drooling on a rock 10 seconds ago. Morning, he mumbles, rubbing sleep from his eyes with the back of his hand, like a sulky teenager. You grunt in response. The sheep are already wandering. One is headbutting a shrub with such passion, you consider offering it a motivational poster. Today is shearing day. You were warned about shearing day. There is no glamour in it, no noble poetry, just a lot of wool, a lot of sheep, and a lot of increasingly judgmental eye contact from animals who do not appreciate spontaneous haircuts. Apollo rolls up his sleeves. He's in his we're doing this mode now. Focused, silent, annoyingly efficient. The first you resist like a champion. She kicks, squirms, and releases a bleat so intense that birds scatter from the trees. Mainstream historical fact. Sheep shearing in ancient Greece was a laborious but crucial part of the pastoral calendar. The wool wasn't just used for clothing. It was spun, dyed, woven, and sometimes offered in temples as part of ritual dedications. Skilled shearers were highly valued, often working in pairs to speed up the task. Apollo, to his credit, shears with the concentration of a surgeon and the flair of someone who once sculpted music out of silence. He even hums again, just a little, a low tune you can't place. You manage to handle 2 sheep before your hands cramp. By the third, you're covered in tufts of wool and existential questions. Apollo doesn't tease you. He just hands you a fig and moves to the next sheep. Around midday, the sun climbs into full torment mode. The pasture hums with heat. Everyone's sweating. The sheep look like damp clouds with opinions. You pause under the lone olive tree, swig water from a clay jug, and stare at your filthy hands. The lines in your palms are caked with lanolin and dust. Your back aches. Your legs protest. Then you notice Apollo, staring into the distance, not at the sheep, not at the hills, at something above. A vulture circles lazily in the sky. Another joins it. Apollo watches them, face unreadable. His hands still grip the shears, but he's not moving. Bad omen. You ask, mostly joking. He doesn't laugh. Fringe tidbit. In some Orphic texts, vultures were said to be messengers between the underworld and the living. Their arrival was seen not just as a sign of death, but as a whisper of something cosmic shifting. You get the feeling Apollo isn't looking at birds. He finally exhales. They're watching. Who? He shrugs, but his jaw tightens. They always are. You both go back to shearing. Historians still argue whether Apollo's exile was ever truly private. Some believe the gods kept tabs on him constantly, using dreams, birds, and borrowed eyes to track his every mortal move. Others claim his punishment included divine surveillance precisely because he couldn't be trusted to stay in one form for long. As the day wears on, the piles of wool grow. The sheep look half their size. The shepherds begin collecting bundles, tying them with reeds, laughing about who ended up with the most nicks and bites. Apollo, however, seems quieter. He finishes his last sheep, wipes his blade, and sits down under the olive tree, eyes closed. You sit beside him. You were good today, you say, and mean it. He grunts, but there's a twitch of a smile. Sheep don't argue about prophecy. You glance at him. You miss it. The prophecy or the arguing? You chuckle. Apollo leans back, arm behind his head, and watches the vulture drift across the sun. I miss knowing what I am, he says finally, and not having pretend otherwise. It's a quiet sentence, a soft one, but it lands hard. You don't know what to say, so you just lie beside him. Eventually, the shepherds build another fire, smaller this time. Dinner is lentil stew with too much garlic and a flatbread, so burn it might qualify as a weapon. You eat it anyway. Hunger lowers standards fast. Apollo, oddly, produces a small bottle from the folds of his cloak. Wine, he offers. It's strong, possibly illegal, definitely not grape-based. You both cough on the first sip, then laugh so hard you scare the sheep. Later, when the fire burns low and the stars begin to spill across the sky, one of the younger shepherds pulls out a lyre. He strums. Poorly, Apollo takes it. Doesn't ask. Doesn't boast. Just plays. and everything, wind, grass, flame, silence, leans in. You listen, you breathe, you forget just for a moment that the man beside you once held the sun in his hands. The next morning, you wake up to the sound of someone trying and failing to whistle. You crack one eye open and see Apollo perched on a rock, lips pursed, blowing air like a confused kettle. "I've almost got it," he says mid-puff. You ever tried whistling with cracked lips? You groan and roll over. The sun hasn't even cleared the hills yet. The sheep are already chewing things. You're not sure what. You don't want to know. Today is delivery day. The wool bundles, scratchy and tightly tied with woven reeds, must be carted to the village market down the hill. The shepherds are busy loading them onto 2 ox-drawn wagons. One ox looks like it's ready to retire. The other looks like it already did, and no one told it. You're assigned to ride in the back with the wool while Apollo, clearly blessed with charisma and zero sense of fairness, sits up front holding the reins. The road is dusty, narrow, and full of rocks that were probably placed there by ancient prankster spirits. Every bump jolts your spine like divine percussion practice. The wool smells earthy, warm, faintly sheepish. You try to nestle into it. You fail. It's like lying on a lumpy pile of burlap and unresolved trauma. Apollo, of course, starts singing. It's a travel song, something rhythmic, ancient, and suspiciously catchy. You hum along before you realize what you're doing. The oxen perk up. One even picks up the pace. You wonder if that qualifies as a minor miracle. Mainstream historical fact. Music wasn't just entertainment in ancient Greece. It was embedded in labor. Harvest songs, rowing chants, even wool-working melodies were part of daily life, helping workers stay in rhythm and push through long hours. Shepherds had their own tunes, often passed down orally across generations. The path winds through olive groves and low hills. Farmers wave. Children shout greetings. One throws a grape at Apollo. He catches it, eats it, and bows like it was an offering. You reach the village by mid-morning. It's small, sun-baked, and full of chatter. The market square is a swirl of colors, draped fabrics, hanging herbs, basket of figs, and jars of pickled something. There are stalls selling everything from dyed tunics to bronze tweezers. Someone's playing an all-us badly in the corner. A chicken walks past you with the confidence of an elected official. Apollo helps unload the wool. He chats with the merchant like they're old friends. You suspect this is just his default mode, always slightly too charming, slightly too golden, even when his hands are dirty and his tunic smells like goat. The merchant inspects the wool, nods approvingly, and gives the shepherd a handful of coins and a string of dried apricots. Payment complete. You think that's the end of the day. It's not. The village elder, wrinkled, sandal-wearing, with eyebrows like independent creatures, spots Apollo. "You," he says, pointing. "You're the singing one." Apollo straightens. "Guilty." The elder beckons. "We're short a lyre player for the midday offering. Someone insulted Hera, and now no one wants to perform." Fringe tidbit. In many rural communities, public rituals weren't just about prayer. There were opportunities for social performance, gossip, matchmaking, and showcasing talent. A good musician could elevate a sacrifice. A bad one could offend the gods and ruin everyone's crops. You're about to object on Apollo's behalf. He's tired, you're tired. The oxen are definitely tired. But Apollo's already nodding. "I'll play," he says. So now you're standing beside a small, smoky altar while Apollo tunes a borrowed lyre. The village has gathered. The air smells like burnt barley and thyme. A young girl balances a basket of flower petals on her head. A boy beside her holds a goat by a leash and looks deeply unsure about everything. Apollo plays. The melody is gentle, spiraling like a ribbon of warm air. People listen. Even the goat sits down. The flames of the altar flicker as if moved by the tune. Historians still argue whether the gods truly responded to music during rituals, or whether it was the community's belief, the shared awe that gave those moments power. Either way, something shifts in the air when Apollo plays. You feel it. Everyone does. Afterward, the elder claps him on the shoulder and says, "You should stay." Apollo smiles politely, but shakes his head. You don't press him. You both know he won't. As the sun begins to dip, the carts are reloaded with a few traded goods, grain sacks, a spool of linen, a new comb someone clearly needed weeks ago. The return journey is slower, more contemplative. Apollo leans back against the wagon, eyes closed, one foot tapping softly against the wood. You watch the hills roll by. The olive trees sway. The oxen grunt in rhythm. You ever miss Olympus? You ask quietly. Apollo opens one eye. Sometimes. What part? He's quiet for a long moment. Then, the view. You snort. That's it. He smiles. And the wine. Back at the pasture, the shepherds begin sorting the new supplies. Someone starts a small fire. Someone else finds a half-melted cheese wheel and cheers like they've discovered Atlantis. Apollo disappears for a while. You find him later near the edge of the field, sitting on a boulder, looking up at the stars just beginning to prick the sky. "They're the same," he says. "What are?" "The stars. From here, from there." You sit beside him. "They don't look different," he continues, "but I see them differently." You don't ask what he means. You just look, too. Above you, the sky opens. Quiet, vast, familiar. Sometimes exile doesn't change the view, just the viewer. The next few days pass with a sleepy rhythm. Morning mist over the hills, sheep braying for no reason you can decipher, and Apollo whistling increasingly complex tunes like he's trying to invent a new musical genre. The shepherds have grown used to him. They no longer gawk when he casually hums a harmony that makes grass seem to sway in tune. Today, however, things take a slight turn. It starts when Thano, the oldest shepherd, gruff, balding, suspicious of anything that smells like poetry, finds Apollo sketching patterns in the dirt with a stick. Not random doodles. Spirals, curves, and odd runes that don't quite match any known language. Thano squints. "That math!" Apollo shrugs. "Sort of. It's harmony. Ratios. The way sound moves." Thano snorts. "Well, as long as it doesn't scare the sheep. You know better. That pattern? It's the golden mean, or something eerily close to it." Apollo's probably trying to transcribe the geometry, the celestial vibration, using a twig and boredom. Mainstream historical fact. The ancient Greeks believed music was deeply tied to mathematics and cosmic order. Pythagoras famously explored how intervals and harmony align with numerical ratios, sparking centuries of philosophical thought on the music of the spheres. Later that afternoon, while collecting water from the nearby spring, you find Apollo perched on a flat rock beside the stream, balancing a lyre across his lap. He's plucking strings, pausing, adjusting, plucking again. His brows are furrowed. "What's wrong with your song?" You ask. He sighs. "It's too good." "What?" He plucks again. A shimmering cascade of notes floats into the air. Nearby frogs stop mid-ribbit. A breeze seems to hold its breath. "I'm trying to make it worse," he says flatly. "I keep failing." Apparently, divine instinct doesn't come with an off switch. Even stripped of his immortality, Apollo still crafts melodies like they belong to mountaintops. Fringe tidbit. In some lesser-known stories, Apollo wasn't always graceful. There are fragments of satirical poetry where he's mocked for being overly dramatic or too obsessed with perfection. Imagine the ancient equivalent of someone who critiques every lute solo like it a life or death matter. That evening, around the cook fire, the shepherds begin their usual banter. Who forgot to patch a sandal? Who stole someone else's olives? Who snores like a dying centaur? Someone pulls out a battered flute. Another has a crude drum made from stretched goatskin over a pot. They play. Poorly. You brace for Apollo's judgment. But he just smiles and joins in softly, gently, not outshining anyone. He blends in like music itself, folding his divine skill into their clumsy rhythms. It's weirdly generous. Later, he leans toward you and whispers, "It's not about skill, it's about showing up. You consider that. Maybe even gods need to learn how to be bad at things sometimes. Not because they lack talent, but because they're trying to meet mortals where they are." Historians still argue whether gods like Apollo retained their powers when living among mortals. Some myths say they were stripped of everything. Others suggest they simply chose not to wield it. In Apollo's case, maybe it was less about loss and more about restraint. The following morning, a new task: separating the young lambs from their overly clingy mothers so they can learn independence. It's chaos. Wolf flies. Dust clouds rise. You're pretty sure one lamb develops teleportation out of sheer panic. Apollo, unbothered, picks up one squealing baby and cradles it like it's made of clouds and lullabies. You blink. "You're good at this." He shrugs. Twins. Artemis was a screamer. You nearly choke laughing. Eventually, the herd settles. Lambs bleat from one side of the pen. Mothers reply mournfully from the other, like a sad opera written in bleats. Apollo pulls out his lyre again, different tune this time. Slow, tender, almost lullaby-like. And somehow, some impossible divine trick. The lambs quiet. You and Thano lock eyes. He narrows his gaze. That music again. You tense. Is this it? Is Apollo about to be outed? Thano adds, "Reckon we should have hired him sooner." You exhale. By now, even the most skeptical shepherds are won over. Apollo might be odd. He might stare at stars too long or make the olive trees hum. But he shows up. He feeds the animals. He lifts heavy sacks. He listens when old Thano rambles about his arthritis like it's a war story. The sun sinks low behind the hills. Fires flicker to life. Someone starts telling the story of the time a satyr tried to sell fake olives to a cyclops. Everyone laughs, even Apollo. He's changed, not in the dramatic winged chariot sense, but in the small, sleepy, mortal way that change really happens. Day by day, scratch by scratch, slowly smoothing down the sharp edges of godhood. You look at him, golden hair tangled, tunic smeared with ashen grass, and you wonder, not for the first time, how long he'll stay, because exile can be a punishment. But sometimes it's a pause, a quiet space between songs. Morning again, soft sunlight leaking through the mist, sheep yawning, yes, sheep can yawn apparently, and the ever-reliable chorus of Apollo's off-key shepherd friends arguing over whose turn it is to clean the latrine trench. You're back on the hill, watching Apollo sketch spiral patterns into the dust again. This time, though, he's humming under his breath. Something darker, more angular. You inch closer and realize the melody is unfamiliar. Not Greek, not even Roman. Something older. Where'd you hear that? You ask. He glances at you. I didn't. I dreamed it. Naturally, he flicks a pebble across the spiral, disrupting the pattern like a stone tossed into a still pond. I think it's time, he murmurs. You freeze. Time for what? But he doesn't answer. Instead, he stands, brushes the dust off his tunic, and heads toward the sheep pen. A day passes like that. Then another. Nothing dramatic. No thunderbolts. Just a subtle pulling away. Apollo becomes a little quieter. His songs a little softer. He still helps mend the fence and herd the lambs, but his eyes keep drifting toward the sky, like he's listening for something. Mainstream historical fact. In myth, Apollo didn't serve his shepherd sentence forever, depending on which version you read. He stayed with King Admetus for either 1 year, 9 years, or until the gods decided his punishment had been served. Ancient authors were nothing if not flexible with their timelines. Later that evening, you find Apollo sitting at the edge of the camp, sharpening a twig into a point. Not for any reason, just something to do with his hands. You sit beside him, waiting. Finally, he speaks. I like this, he says. Even the smell of sheep, even the bad wine. You smile. So what happens now? He sighs. I think I go home. There's no ceremony, no bolt of light, no winged chariot. But when he stands, something shifts. The fire crackles more eagerly. The stars above seem to lean in. Even the sheep bleat more respectfully. It's like the world knows. Apollo's time here is ending. Here's a fringe tidbit. Some ancient sources whisper that Apollo left the shepherd's life not because his punishment was lifted, but because he fell in love with it. One even suggests he returned to the hills in disguise years later, just to listen to the flutes again. The next morning, you wake to find Apollo gone. Not dramatically. His tunic still hangs from the fence post. His cup still rests by the fire, but he's nowhere to be seen. The other shepherds don't panic. They shrug. Maybe he went to town, someone says. Or back to Olympus, someone else mutters with a grin. No one really knows, or wants to ask. Instead, they carry on. The sheep still need tending. The fence still leans. Thanos still complains about his back. You find yourself staring at the rock by the stream where Apollo used to sit. There's a feather lying there. Not fancy, not divine, just a soft, cream-colored feather. You pick it up. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe not. Historians still argue whether myths like this one, about gods doing menial jobs, were meant to humble the divine or elevate the mortal. Some say it was propaganda, a way to remind people that even the mighty must obey justice. Others believe these stories hint at an older tradition, that gods and humans once shared space, breath, and breakfast. That night, you light the cook fire a little early. You hum one of Apollo's tunes. Badly, the sheep don't mind. A few of the younger shepherds try to harmonize. It's a disaster, but it feels right. And then, just before sleep takes you, you hear it, a distant pluck of lyre string high on the wind. Faint, playful, you smile into your blanket of wool and dust. Apollo may be gone, but he left behind more than empty cups and feathered clues. He left behind rhythm. The rhythm of waking, working, singing, and sleeping. You close your eyes. The wind hums a lullaby. And somewhere up in the stars, or maybe just over the next hill, a former god of light hums along. The days pass. The sheep keep grazing. The cook fires keep burning. And life, as it tends to do, continues. You've settled into the shepherd rhythm now. Less because you chose it, more because it's simply what happens when there's nothing else to do. Wake with a mist, count the sheep, swat flies, eat lentils, repeat. But something's shifted in the camp since Apollo left. Not a huge shift. No divine tremors or celestial announcements, but quiet thinning, like someone took the color out of sunrise. Thano, ever philosopher, notices too. It's like the music left, he grumbles one morning, squinting at the sky. Even the birds sound less smug. You nod, stirring the pot of barley with a stick. Maybe it was him keeping the snakes away. Puff, Thano scoffs. You think he really was a god? You shrug. He played a mean liar. Lots of people play liars. Not with lightning behind the chords. He grunts. Fair. Mainstream historical fact. Apollo was not just a god of music, prophecy, and sunlight, but also of sudden departures. In many myths, he arrives in a blaze, meddles meaningfully, then vanishes without a goodbye. He was the original seen and not texted. One evening, after the sheep have been counted and Thano is snoring with impressive violence, you find yourself walking the ridge. It's quiet. The stars are unusually bright. And there, sitting on a rock that feels far too symbolic to be coincidence, is a traveler. Not Apollo, not a god, just a young man with a satchel, a crooked grin, and a flute. He nods at you. Evening. You nod back. Mind if I play? You gesture at the sky. Go ahead. They could use a tune. He starts to play, not well, not divinely, just enough to carry a tune into the darkness. You sit beside him, watching the firelight flicker below. The sheep shuffle and grunt in their sleep. A dog dreams loudly nearby, feet twitching in pursuit of some phantom squirrel. The music doesn't soar. It stumbles, but it's honest. A fringe tidbit. In some variations of myth, Apollo left behind a single lyre string as a token. That string, said to hum when the moon was full, inspired wandering musicians for centuries. One even claimed it whispered riddles in his sleep. No one else heard them, of course, but he swore by it. The boy finishes his song. You clap softly. Not bad, you say. Not great, he replies. You both laugh. Name's Damon, he says, offering you a crust of bread. You accept it, tearing a chunk and chewing thoughtfully. It tastes like old grain and shared silence. I came looking for someone, he says, staring into the fire. They said he used to play here. Golden hair. Knew every bird's name. You raise an eyebrow. You're a fan? He shrugs. More like Curious, I want to know if he was real. You don't answer right away. Instead, you toss a twig into the fire and watch it curl, real enough to leave a silence behind. You say. He nods slowly. Yeah, that's what I heard. Historians still argue whether myths grow out of real events or they're dreams that stick around too long. Maybe Apollo was a god. Maybe he was just a wandering bard with charisma and great hair. Or maybe both. History has a funny way of blurring the line between fact and meaning. You lean back, gazing up at the stars. Somewhere above or beyond, Apollo is probably tuning his lyre, arguing with the muses, or sunbathing dramatically across a celestial chaise lounge. And yet, here, beside a shepherd's fire, listening to a mortal boy fumble a flute, you feel something just as sacred. Not awe, not divinity, but continuity. The music keeps going. The stories keep echoing. You break off another piece of bread. Damon hums quietly, and the night wraps around you like an old, familiar song. The fire dies slow. You and Damon sit in a hush that follows a shared song, neither rushing to fill it with words. Around you, the hills breathe, a steady rhythm of wind, grass, and the occasional bleat from particularly unsettled sheep. Morning creeps in like a rumor, not loud or fast, just a gentle brightening at the edges of things. You stretch, brush the dew from your tunic, and toss the last crumb of bread to a brave little mouse darting under a rock. Damon's already up, practicing finger positions on his flute, brow furrowed like a general planning a campaign. He's not very good, but he tries, and that, oddly enough, reminds you of someone. You pack up camp with the usual rituals: pot, blanket, the eternally gritty water skin. Damon walks with you for a while, asking questions. Was Apollo tall? Did he laugh often? Did he ever mention the oracle? You answer what you can, but most of your replies start with, well, once, and end with a sheep interrupting something important. You tell him about the time Apollo lost a staring contest to a goat. He's quiet for a beat, then laughs so hard he trips over a root. Mainstream historical fact. In classical mythology, Apollo had many mortal adventures, not all glorious. He lost in love, in music contests, and once even got tricked by Hermes into trading valuable cattle for a handmade lyre. He wasn't perfect, and that, perhaps, is what made him so enduring. By midday, Damon peels off toward a fork in the trail, bound for some coastal town where musicians gather. He promises to remember your stories. You promise to pretend he didn't leave his pan flute behind. It's only after he's gone that you realize something. Apollo changed the tempo, not just of the sheep camp or your personal hygiene schedule, but of your expectations, of what a god could be, of what a morning could hold. You walk alone for a while, feeling the rhythm of your feet against the dry earth, the tug of hunger in your belly, and the sun on your neck. And then, faint like a half-remembered song, you hear laughter. Familiar, golden, and definitely overdramatic. You stop, look around, see nothing, but still you smile. Later, you reach a small village at the edge of the forest. You've been here before once, long ago, back when you were looking for work and had far fewer sandals. It's quieter now. The inn still leans like it's drunk. The smithy still bangs at metal like it owes him money. And the baker still makes those ridiculous honeyed spirals that stick to your fingers and your soul in equal measure. You buy one, for old time's sake. As you eat, you spot a mural on the side of a crumbling wall, faded but detailed. A man, radiant and tall, holding a lyre aloft with sheep surrounding him in neat little rows. His cloak is russet, his sandals golden, his expression smug beyond belief. And in the corner, some cheeky villager with opinions, has scratched a single word: fired. You laugh so hard the honey spiral nearly exits your nose. A fringe tidbit. In some preserved Roman graffiti, gods were treated with a reverence that would make modern theology professors sweat. Jupiter was mocked for womanizing. Bacchus was accused of being a lightweight. Even Apollo, the golden boy, got jabbed for thinking too much of his own hair. You finish your pastry, wiping your hands on your tunic, and head back toward the hills. You don't have a destination exactly, but that's kind of the point now. The journey isn't about ending where you started. It's about what you collect on the way. Crumbs of music, traces of divinity, weird friends who leave their flutes behind. Historians still argue whether myths were ever meant to be linear. Was Apollo's stint as a shepherd a punishment or a lesson, a footnote or the whole point? Was it even Apollo at all, or just some charismatic traveler who sparked rumors with every note he played? Does it matter? You walk faster now, wind in your face and laughter in your throat. You think about Damon, about Thano, about sheep that learn to appreciate key changes. And you realize something very unacademic, very unverified, and very true. Even gods need a gap year, especially the shiny ones. You crest the hill. The valley opens wide before you. A breeze stirs the grass. And somewhere, carried on the air, faint and playful, a melody hums. Not quite a song, not quite silence, but something in between, something waiting to be heard. You follow the trail down into that broad valley, boots coated in soft dust and your thoughts spiraling quietly in rhythm with each step. The sun hangs low now, casting long shadows from crooked olive trees, and the air carries that warm, baked stone smell that only late afternoon knows how to conjure. Your shoulders are a little sore, your honey spiral is long since worn off, and your mind drifts, because that's what walking under a sky like this is for. You remember Apollo's first few days at the flock, how the sheep never quite trusted him, how he tripped over more rocks than he'd ever admit, how he once got genuinely offended by a particularly judgmental goat. You didn't say anything at the time, but you're pretty sure that goat won. You remember him cursing the sun like he didn't personally drive it across the sky, grumbling about mortal angles and the ridiculous weight of actual dirt. But then, something shifted. One day, he stopped wearing sandals that sparkled. Another, he asked how to tie a proper knot in the twine gate. And then there was the moment he whistled a tune that calmed an entire panicking herd. Mainstream historical fact. In many myths, Apollo evolves over time. He begins as a somewhat arrogant young god, brilliant, yes, but deeply full of himself. But through his various trials, slaying Python, loving Daphne in vain, losing to Pan, he grows. Not softer, exactly, just more aware, more complex. His time as a shepherd might not be the most famous story, but it's arguably the most human. You find a smooth stone near a stream and sit. The water glides past like it has somewhere very important to be. You dip your fingers in, it's cold, clear, and brings your wandering mind back to now. Just for a second, a bird chirps. You chirp back. It ignores you completely. There's a village nearby. You can see the terracotta roof from here, but you don't go there. Not yet. You stay with the water, with the breeze, with whatever version of yourself walked beside a sun god and lived to tell the tale. You remember a night when Apollo couldn't sleep and told you the constellations like bedtime stories, each one with a backstory, each one with at least one doomed love affair. You asked him which one was his favorite. He didn't say. He just pointed to a cluster low on the horizon and whispered, "That one doesn't exist yet." A fringe tidbit. In some lesser-known Hellenistic texts, Apollo is rumored to have created an unnamed constellation during his exile, one visible only to shepherds who stay up too late and know where to look. No one agrees what was called, or if it even existed outside of wine-fueled hallucinations. You lie back now, arms folded under your head, staring up at the sky. You think about the idea of a constellation that doesn't exist yet, something you can only see if you believe it should be there. Kind of like gods with jobs. Kind of like you with stories. A cart rolls by in the distance, pulled by an overworked donkey and driven by a man arguing with his dog. You hear only bits of the rant. Something about missing figs and poor decision-making. You let the sound wash over you, like a poorly tuned lullaby. Historians still argue whether Apollo's shepherd episode was a literal tale or a symbolic one. Some say it's about humility. Others think it's an agricultural allegory. A few, mostly the really dramatic scholars, suggest it was an identity crisis wrapped in divine sheep's clothing. But maybe it was just a god having a really weird year. And maybe that's enough. The breeze shifts. You get up. You start walking again, not because you know where you're going, but because standing still suddenly feels too loud. You pass a boy carrying a flute shaped like a bird's wing. You nod. He nods back. Neither of you stops. You reach a wide field, half-baked in golden light. Somewhere in the tall grass, a cricket starts its evening solo. You pause to listen. It's not Apollo's lyre, but it's good, honest, very committed. And then you feel it again. That hum, faint, tucked behind the hills. A melody you've never quite forgotten. And you don't even turn around this time, because you know what it is. Because gods, like stories, never really leave. They echo. They linger in the fields and the fig trees, in flute music and forgotten footpaths, in that one weird sheep that always walked in circles. And they wait for you to remember, not with thunder, not with miracles, but with breakfast pastries and off-key lullabies and the occasional sarcastic smile. So you keep walking, because maybe he's out there again, learning how to make cheese, trying not to get stung by bees, singing about heartbreak in a village that's only ever seen one sun. And maybe, just maybe, you'll meet again, on another hill, in another myth, with fewer sheep this time. You follow the last stretch of the trail as it curves gently toward the edge of the valley, where the trees thin out and the sky takes over. The air smells faintly of rosemary and sheep wool, and somewhere ahead, you hear the familiar clatter of hooves on stone. It's nearly evening now, one of those Roman dusts that turns a whole landscape into gold leaf, as if the gods themselves could resist showing off a little. There's a path here you know well, worn into the hills by sandale feet and stubborn animals. You can picture him now. Apollo, carrying a staff he carved himself badly. His tunic stained with grape juice, leading a sheep parade that clearly had its own ideas about direction. There's something comforting about it. The idea of a god being less of him messing up. Of him, just for a little while, being awkward and mortal and weird. Mainstream historical fact. The Greeks believed that even the gods were subject to fate, that even beings with unimaginable power had their limits. Apollo could kill with a thought, but he couldn't always keep his own heart from breaking. He could sing the stars into place, but he still needed someone to show him how to milk a goat. You pass a stone outcrop where the moss grows thick and velvet soft. You sit there for a moment, stretching your legs, brushing the dust from your tunic. The wind moves through the grass like a hush, as if the whole world is waiting to hear the next part. And maybe it's the stillness, or maybe it's the altitude, but something catches in your throat when you think of the end, because it did end. Eventually, the flock was handed over to someone else. Eventually, Apollo got called back to Olympus. Duty or destiny, or some divine group chat lit up and said, "Time to come home." And he went, just like that. But you stayed behind. You remember his last day vividly. He wore clean linen. He smelled like honey and olive wood. His hands were steady, but his eyes flicked around like he was memorizing everything. The shape of the hills, the tilt of the sun, your face and profile. He handed you something wrapped in cloth. You haven't opened it. You're not sure if you ever will. A fringe tidbit. In one rare version of the myth, Apollo doesn't leave immediately. He lingers in disguise for a week, just watching. Sitting in the village square, listening to gossip, telling a few fortunes. They say he laughed once, really laughed, at a farmer's bad joke about sheep. Then he was gone by morning. You run your thumb over a groove in the stone beneath you. Nature's version of a memory. Maybe you look up and realize the stars are beginning to appear. The first shy ones. The ones that always blink in surprise, like they forgot they were part of the show. And in that moment you think, maybe gods don't fall from grace. Maybe they descend on purpose. To remember what it means to sweat, to fail, to laugh until they can't breathe, to eat barley mash with a wooden spoon and pretend they like it. Historians still argue whether Apollo's exile stories were meant to humble him or humanize him. Some say the myths serve as morality tales, reminders that no one, not even a god, is above consequence. Others believe they reflect an older truth, that sometimes divinity needs to rest in the arms of the ordinary. You lie back, arms folded behind your head, watching as the constellations sharpen. You remember when he told you their names, Orion, Andromeda, that sneaky dolphin one he made up on the spot. You asked him how he knew all that. He smirked. I put them there. You didn't believe him then. You might now. A breeze brushes past. You think of lyres, of clumsy prayers, of honeyed chestnuts, and the way he squinted at the sun like it owed him something. And you realize you miss him. Not the god, not the golden boy in laurel wreaths. Just the guy who complained about sheep blisters and once tripped over a bucket. You sit up slowly, joints popping, eyes stinging just a little from the wind. The valley is nearly dark. You should go, but for now you just sit. One last moment with the memory. One last quiet with the stars. Because breakfast gods are rare. Because not all myths end in fire or thunder. Some end with dust on your sandals. And an unopened cloth in your pocket. The stars overhead thicken into a soft, sleepy quilt. The kind you can pull over your thoughts when they begin to wander. The cool hush of night seeps into the edges of the valley, drawing long shadows across the hills. Everything slows now, even the breeze, even your breath, as if the world itself is tucking you in, You're still sitting there, your legs stretched before you, your shoulders finally sinking. The stone beneath you isn't uncomfortable anymore. It's steady, familiar, like the rhythm of a story told 100 times. Maybe it's never been about how it ends. Maybe it's just about the stillness you get to carry with you after. That wrap cloth in your pocket feels lighter now. Not because it weighs less, but because the mystery no longer nags. You don't need to open it. Some gifts are meant to be held, not unwrapped. Like memory, like quiet, like the way the night gently closes around you. The village below has gone quiet. Just the occasional flicker of a lantern. Maybe someone stirs in their sleep. Maybe someone dreams of golden lyres and fig trees and strange boys who turn out to be gods. The scent of olive trees lingers faintly, and the crickets have taken over the soundtrack of the night. Nothing grand, nothing loud, just the sound of the earth catching its breath. You take one last look at the stars. They're brighter now, but not urgent. Just there, watching. Steady. You close your eyes. Let the air cool your cheeks. Let the quiet find your bones. There's no thunder, no trumpet, just rest. And tomorrow? Tomorrow could be another story. For now, just sleep